Hi, my name is Austin Albright. I'm going to be your teacher this semester for Econ 102 or Macroeconomics. I'm still figuring out the best way to do these videos, and I'm still working on the setup. I want to get a whiteboard right here so that you guys can take notes that way. I can write up there and do examples. However, I don't have that figured out exactly yet, maybe next week or the following week. If you have suggestions, I'm open to criticism, so please let me know how I can make these better for you guys. And all I ask is that you're patient while we figure this out. You know, with COVID going on, it's been a little bit hectic and I haven't figured out the best teaching method. So again, please be patient. I really appreciate it. Thank you. In this class, we'll be going over Principles of Macroeconomics by Gregory Mankiw. This is the 9th edition. You can use whichever edition. The book isn't required. I know it can get expensive, so don't worry about it. All the information you'll need is through these lecture videos, hopefully, and also the PowerPoints. The PowerPoints are really good. I did think about voicing over and sharing my screen and going through the PowerPoints with you guys, but I figured that might be a little bit redundant. You guys can read the PowerPoints, and you know, I wouldn't be offering too much more information. So that kind of covers the main stuff. Make sure to read the syllabus. That's going to have the schedule. I'm hoping to go a chapter a week, making a lecture video. I might break them up into 2 lecture videos a week to make it a little bit more digestible, but it'll still only cover 1 chapter. And it also has the grading on there. And also, please look at the paper instructions. Don't worry about the paper. It's not very strict. It's going to be a really easy assignment. Don't worry about it. It's just more so that I can check to make sure you guys are understanding it and that I'm teaching well. So that's kind of it for the course. We'll get into lesson 1 now, which is incidentally the first chapter, the 10 Principles of Macroeconomics. Now I'm assuming, and I believe this is the case, that you guys have taken microeconomics. If you haven't, don't worry about it. But if you have, you'll know that microeconomics is the study of how an individual or household or an individual firm makes a decision. Well, in macroeconomics, we're still interested in that. We're interested, however, on how millions of households and millions of firms make decisions. Think of it more on a global level. Countries interacting with other countries, or how a whole country interacts with itself. Now let's go into the first principle of the 10. The first principle is that people face trade-offs. This has large implications. Everybody deals with this every single day, and whenever you make a decision, you're dealing with trade-offs. The old adage, there's no such thing as free lunch, holds true. Even if someone offers you a free lunch, supposedly no strings attached, you still have to give up your time as your resource to go get it, to eat it, right? You're trading off time for food. You know, oftentimes we might be happy and we might think, well, it's a no-brainer, it's a good deal. But there are always trade-offs. Now that's definitely true on an individual level. But is it on a macro level, on a continent or global level? Well, yeah, they do. They still face trade-offs. Think of a big economy like the United States. We often have a trade-off between pollution and income. We always want more income, and in order to have a higher income, we have to produce more goods and services. We have to give more, right? We sell it to them, they buy it to us, or they buy it from us, not to us. They buy it from us, and we have a higher production, right? We need to produce more, and when we produce more, what are we creating? We're creating toxics or pollutants. So there's a trade-off. If we want higher income, we're going to get higher pollution. If we want a clean environment, we want lower pollution, we're going to have to scale back our production and decrease our income. This is why many nations cheat on emission standards or goals or maybe agreements that countries make together. This is also why companies cheat on, like the Volkswagen, or was it BMW a few years ago, that cheated on their emission standards so that they could advertise a fuel-efficient car, but it wasn't. They cheated on it so that they could use inferior technology and make more money. They'd have a higher income. That covers the first principle. We'll be moving on to the second principle, opportunity cost. Now, opportunity cost is simply the cost of something is what you give up to get it. Sounds pretty reasonable, but it's often overlooked when we make decisions, and it's also not always clear what the opportunity cost is. Now, I think the best way to kind of get a grasp for opportunity cost is an example. So we're going to look at the opportunity cost for college, something we're all familiar with. What would we say the cost of college is? Tuition. That's the big one. Maybe books. Also, increased travel. We have to travel to the college or the university. We spend more on gasoline. Increase food expenditures. We're not living at home. Mom's not cooking our meals anymore. We might have to go out more. I'm not a very good cook. I like to go out. So I definitely spent a lot more money on food. Increased rent, which is another big one. We move closer to the university or college, maybe get some roommates, or maybe we're living in the dorm. It can get pretty expensive. But what else are we giving up? We're giving up something else. A big one. Probably bigger than any of these. 4 years of our life where we could be doing anything else. Doing so many different things. Well, this 4 years, that's included in the opportunity cost. It's not just this stuff. This isn't just the cost of college. It's also this. We're giving up 4 years. Now, if I want to quantitatively measure 4 years, how could I do it? Well, one way might be to say, I could be working for 4 years, right? If I'm working for 4 years, maybe I'm working a job that's $40,000 a year. Sorry for the writing, it's kind of hard. Now, $40,000 a year for 4 years, right? We multiply them, we're going to get $160,000. That's a lot of money. That's a lot more than what this would probably add up to. So let's assume all of this stuff maybe adds up to $60,000. Now, most people, especially people who aren't economists, would look at the cost of college and they'd say, hey, it's only $60,000. But economists, we need to consider what we're giving up. Everything we're giving up. We're giving up this and we're giving up this. So we're going to add them together. So the total opportunity cost is going to be plus 60,000, which is going to be 220,000, which is larger than any of the two numbers, right? Now, it's also really important to note that maybe not everybody has the same opportunity cost. I said that their job prospects coming out of high school might be $40,000 a year. Well, maybe if you're in a good position and your parents have connections, that their opportunity cost is much higher. Maybe going to college might be more expensive to them because they can, right out of high school, get a $60,000 job or an $80,000 job. Then going to college becomes a lot more expensive. So that covers opportunity cost. Next, we'll be going on to principle 3, which is rational people think at the margin. Now there's two parts to that. There's the rational people and what I mean by that, and there's also the margin part. First, we'll go into the rational. Now, what I mean by rational is somebody who systematically and purposefully chooses the best option out of the available options for their goal. Which means if I want to offer them any sort of fruit they want, they're going to pick the fruit they like best. If I give them a bunch of options on how to increase their savings, they're going to choose the one that increases their savings the best. So as long as it is the best for their goal. Now the second part is at the margin. Now margin is an incremental adjustment to a plan. Unbeknownst to many, we all make decisions based on margin. Now think about food. It's something everybody does. We sit down and do we decide exactly how much food we want to eat? Exactly? Like how many pounds? Maybe some few people do. But most people, they take a bite of food and they go, oh, was that tasty? Yes or no? Am I still hungry? Yes or no? Well, I am hungry and I thought that bite was delicious. So I'm going for another one. Right? Each bite is an incremental adjustment to my plan of eating. So that each bite is the margin, right? Each one is a marginal change. Now, how does this help us with decision making? How do economists use this so that we know that a person will make a certain decision? We know that a person will take the extra bite and he'll make a decision when the marginal benefit is greater than the marginal cost. As long as this marginal benefit is bigger than the marginal cost, then I'll take another bite, because the benefit of eating the extra bite outweighs the cost. But when the cost of eating the extra bite becomes too much, when it becomes like this, then I won't take an extra bite. Maybe the food is just, I'm too full and it's gonna make me feel sick and I don't want any more. So when the marginal cost is bigger than marginal benefit, I won't take the action, but when the marginal benefit is bigger than the marginal cost, I will take the action. This may lead to surprising results. Let's look at an example of a surprising result that might come from marginal benefits and marginal cost. An airplane costs to travel, right? If I want to move an airplane from Los Angeles to New York, it might cost $200,000. The fuel, the stewards, the pilots. So we're going to have a plane from LA to New York. The cost of the flight, I said, was $200,000. Well, a plane can hold 100 people. Well, what's the price of the ticket? We can divide 200,000 by 100. 200,000 divided by 100. Cross the zeros, we get 2,000 ticket price. So this is the average ticket price, right? Each person needs to pay $2,000 and we'll break even. Well, what if only 90 people are willing to pay this $2,000? Now they're making $180,000. Well, they're still $20,000 away from breaking even. Let's say the plane is going to leave in like 10 minutes. It's going to shortly departure, and it's going to fly from LA to New York. So they're already out $20,000. These 10 people, the 10 people who didn't go on the flight, what if they offered $1,000? So these 10 people that didn't go on the flight are offering $1,000 per ticket. Should the airline accept it? Well, the average ticket price is $2,000. So if they sell it for $1,000, they'll be losing money. But are they better off flying to LA to New York with 90 people and only getting $180,000? Or are they better off flying from LA to New York with 100 people and 10 of them paid $1,000? Well, maybe. They might be. We have to look at the marginal benefit and the marginal cost. Sorry, I know my B's can look like 13s. I'm gonna work on that. Sorry, guys. Well, if the marginal benefit of letting these 10 people on is greater than the marginal cost, then yeah, they should let them on. Right? We said if marginal benefit's bigger than the marginal cost, we take action. We let them on. What's the marginal benefit of letting these 10 people on? Well, it's going to be 10 people times $1,000, which should be $10,000. What's the marginal cost? Well, what's the additional cost of each person going on to the flight? Well, it might be the condiments, the soda, the peanuts, maybe some additional fuel. I don't know how much fuel is, so I'm not going to really factor it into it. But the marginal cost will be the 10 people times the cost of the condiments, right? Which is soda and peanuts, so maybe like $2, which would be 10 times 2, which is $20. Well, the marginal benefit is a lot bigger than the marginal cost. So the airline should let these people fly, and then they'll have 100 people. So even though the plane is still losing money, and even though that these people aren't paying the average ticket price, it's still rational to let these people on. Now that covers principle 3. We'll be moving on to principle 4. People respond to incentives. Now, an incentive is simply something that induces somebody to act. I know a thing is really incentive, but it can take a lot of different forms. Some examples might be a gasoline tax. Now, when we increase the price of gasoline through a tax, it becomes more expensive. So it inhibits people's ability to buy gasoline, maybe encourages people to carpool or take public transportation instead because gasoline is too expensive. The same is true for a cigarette tax. Maybe we want our people to live healthier lives and we don't want the smoking to pass on to the next generation, so we increase cigarette taxes to make them a less ideal or a more expensive product, which makes them less good in a sense, right? The marginal benefit becomes smaller because they're more expensive. Now those might be examples of behaviors we want to try to inhibit or prevent, but maybe we want to encourage some behaviors. How would we do that? Well, we can offer, maybe for cars, we can say hey, I know we want more people to be driving electric cars and we want maybe more people to be driving hybrids, so I'm going to offer a tax rebate so that when they buy a hybrid or they buy an electric car, the government, supplements or pays the person who buys the car some amount of money back so that the car is cheaper, which makes it look better compared to gasoline cars. They're more willing to buy an electric car if it's cheaper or if they get money back. Now, policymakers need to be aware of incentives, because sometimes they could be affecting incentives without really looking or not really even knowing how they might change when they pass a policy or they pass legislation. A great example was in the 1960s. A book was published called Unsafe at Any Speed, which detailed the dangers of driving fast and recklessly. Now, the public was pretty worried about this. They were like, wow, we didn't realize driving was so dangerous. The legislators, the policymakers, wanted to address this concern, and rightfully so. So they passed legislation that required seatbelts in every single vehicle. Now, what happened to the number of deaths that were occurring? Well, they didn't actually change at all. But the death rate per accident did decrease. Seatbelts were helping people survive. However, there was an increase in the number of accidents. There were more accidents occurring on the road. Well, why did this happen? Why are people suddenly getting into more accidents now that are seatbelts, right? Just because I'm wearing a seatbelt, that doesn't mean I'm going to get into an accident, right? It doesn't inhibit my movement so I can't turn. Well, what the policymakers didn't know and couldn't have known was that they changed the marginal benefit and the marginal cost of driving. Now, I should say, instead of driving, maybe driving fast or reckless. When they required seatbelts in vehicles, they lowered the marginal cost. Because when I got into an accident, or when I ran into something, broke something, drove fast, skid off the road, my seatbelt kept me safe. So the cost of getting into these accidents was lowered. They actually, it wasn't so bad if I got into an accident, because I'm more likely to live, more or less likely to injure myself, which ended up doing this. It made, oh sorry, that's kind of hard to see. It made this shape, right? It made the marginal benefit of driving faster and reckless greater than the marginal cost. This might be the same thing as might be more familiar if maybe you've driven on icy roads. When you're driving on icy roads, it's dangerous to go fast, so the marginal cost is high, so you don't drive fast, you drive slow. Well, seatbelts kind of reverse that, and it resulted in a higher pedestrian death overall. But the number of deaths didn't really change. Now that's principle 4. The last principle for this video, and there'll be a part 2 later, will be principle 5, trade makes everyone better off. Now, allowing countries in a specific industry to specialize lowers the cost of that good, whatever they specialize, whatever good. And once the cost is lower, they can trade other countries to be better off. Many people think that countries are competitors. If China does bad, America does better, and we only want America to do well. Well, it's not quite so cut and dry. In reality, we want both countries to do better, because if both are doing better, then we could just trade, and then that makes us even better. This might be easier to see might be a little bit of an extreme example, but think of a small village. Now, in a small village, we'll just say it has 3 people in it. It's really small. There's going to be a baker, there's going to be a farmer, and there's going to be a blacksmith. The blacksmith makes tools for both the farmer and the baker. He makes tools to maybe help plow, help with the yard work for the field, and it helps the baker be able to maybe roll out the dough, or maybe makes an oven for them so that they can make more bread. And obviously the baker provides the food and the farmer provides the wheat. Well, what if all these 3 people are trying to beat each other? They're trying to be competitive. They want to win. They don't want to trade with the other person. Well, the blacksmith is really good at making tools. So he makes really good tools to farm. But he doesn't know how to farm. So he tries to farm, and he gets a small yield of wheat. And then he tries to take that small yield of wheat and he tries to bake. And he burns it. Now he's not eating. Or maybe he's eating very little and he's still hungry and it doesn't taste good. And he's all tired from the day because he made a tool, he went out to farm, and he tried to bake, and he didn't get to do anything else with his time. Well, what about the baker? The baker's sitting there and he's like, alright, I gotta make some tools to farm, maybe make some tools to bake. I don't really know how to make these tools, but I'm just gonna do what I can. And he makes maybe some contraption with sticks to try to help plow, and it doesn't really work, and he doesn't get anything from the farm, or maybe he gets a minuscule amount of wheat from farming, and then he tries to bake, and he's really good baking, so maybe he could still pull out, you know, a nice loaf of bread, and it keeps him full for that day, and he's happy, but it was a lot of work, and he's really tired. And the farmer, he's out there, he's trying to farm, but he doesn't have good tools. He's trying so hard, and he's a good farmer, so maybe he gets a medium amount of wheat, but he's not a good baker. And when he puts it in the oven, it all burns away, and he's really sad. And now there's 3 people who are here, but maybe they could have been here if they traded. Now let's assume they're trading. The blacksmith is a really good trader. Sorry, really good blacksmith. He's really good at making tools. He's really fast at making tools, and he makes really good tools. He gives the tools to the farmer for some wheat. Now the farmer takes these tools and he makes a really big field with a lot of wheat, and he gets it all. He has a plow, and he's able to get a really large yield from farming. He then trades with the baker. He says, I'm gonna give you this wheat and you're gonna make me some sweet bread. And the baker's happy, right? He gets all this wheat. He's gonna be able to trade for some nice tools to make even more bread. He goes to the blacksmith and he tells him, hey, I'm gonna make you the best bread you ever ate. I'm gonna make you a lot of bread. We're all gonna eat bread, but I need some tools. So then the blacksmith person gives him some tools, and the baker makes a ton of really great bread, and all 3 people in the village are a lot happier. They're a lot better off than if they hadn't traded, which is why trade can make everyone better off. There are some extreme circumstances where it doesn't, and it might only make one person better off and make one person worse off. It usually requires certain dynamics or certain situations, so that's more of the exception and not the rule. That covers the 5th principle, and in the next video we'll be going over the last 5 principles of macroeconomics. Thank you for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.